this presentation is gonna be in English. This, I don't know if you have joined before, but we basically every week we dedicate every like weekend to oh sorry, someone is unmuted, I think. Uh, okay, so each week we dedicate like a presentation for other countries so we can know about the countries. Like for example, today it's UK's presentation. So if you like to practice your English listening skills, well, this is the perfect opportunity because we're gonna be listening to one of the most beautiful accents. That's so. If you, I don't know, if you would like to hear this beautiful, amazing accent, especially to Kifi's voice, like guys, I swear to God, Kifi has one of the most beautiful voices I have ever heard.
And
There's
I
another.
love you too. I love you too.
um. So
UK
welcome
accent.
everyone. The UK accent. Neil, you let me know when you start recording.
I've already started, so you can go.
Ok, good. Ok, bienvenidos a todos. Básicamente, por las dudas alguien no sepa por qué estamos acá, vamos a tener una presentación sobre UK. Nativos de ese país van a estar hablando sobre su cultura, etcétera, sobre su historia. Lo van a estar haciendo en inglés, así que si les interesa, a ver, practicar un poco esas listening skills para escuchar un poco, a ver qué tanto pueden entender de la presentación. Eso está muy bueno, porque va a ser puro listening. Así que si les gustaría saber más de UK, si les gustaría escuchar el acento, si les gustaría saber de la historia, si les gustaría practicar esas listening skills porque van a hacer un examen y les van a tomar listening skills y están practicando, si les gusta escuchar el acento, si les gusta escuchar English natives, this is your opportunity. You're in the right place. So welcome. Uh, yeah, we have already presented United States. Les voy a dejar el canal de YouTube porque por las dudas alguien se tenga que ir y quiere escucharla después. Voy a dejar el canal de YouTube para que se puedan suscribir. Denme un segundito, les dejo el link. Yeah, the US presentation is in your YouTube channel. It is here. Ahí está nuestro canal de YouTube. We're gonna post the presentation there. Ahí está el canal de YouTube por si después lo quieren ver. So welcome everyone. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have fun. Today, as I have already said, we are going to have the UK presentation. I don't know, Kifi, if you want to say anything before I start sharing my screen and showing you presentation.
No, I just wanted to say, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming. My name's Keith. People call me Keefy for short. I live in England. I live in the county of Norfolk in England, which is a very quiet little place, very pleasant. But I put this presentation together to give you some idea of where the English people come from. I know that there's also a presentation about Scottish things as well that's coming up. But mine is solely really about the English people, and really where our language comes from. And it also gives you the history of the people who live on our little island just off the coast of Europe. So yeah, Ori, you can start the thing off now. That's fine.
Give me just 1 second. Give me a second. Give me just 1 second. Okay, you let me know, guys, if you can watch my screen. You're supposed to do so.
I can.
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, good. Let's watch it.
I hope it will give you an idea of why our language is as it is, how its peculiarities have arisen, as well as some of the peculiarities of the English national character. The first thing to learn: England is not Britain. It is only a part of Britain. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That's the official name of our country. It is made up of 4 parts. They are Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, and Wales. It is ruled mainly by the Westminster Parliament in London. But there are devolved governments in each of the 4 countries. People are often very proud of their home nations. These are the British Isles. They include all of Ireland in blue, which is an independent country. Great Britain includes only England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Now, I'm going to be talking mainly about England, because that's where I come from. I'm now going to go way back into history, when
En caso de que no estén escuchando, súbanle el volumen a la presentación porque tiene sonido. Por las dudas alguien no le haya puesto play. Por las dudas.
woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers still roamed in Europe. Many thousands of years ago, the British Isles were connected to Europe in an extensive landmass. The areas between England and Europe are now known as Doggerland. The dark green areas. These are some of the objects found on the seabed of Doggerland. They show that the area was inhabited by early humans. The bones of mammoths and other animals have also been found. Doggerland. The extensive land connection to the mainland of Europe enabled early humans not only to settle in what is now the North Sea, but also to populate what have now become the British Isles. So, what happened to Doggerland? It is now understood that some 8,000 years ago, a massive landslip off the coast of Norway caused a tsunami, which raised sea levels and swamped Doggerland, which eventually disappeared beneath the North Sea. So were the people who crossed over from Europe through Doggerland the English? Short answer, no. We came much later. Over many thousands of years, people arrived in Britain from the continent of Europe. Some came via Doggerland, but later they came by sea. Many came from Western Europe and originated from southern Germany, Switzerland, and Belgium. They brought with them their own skills and culture. They were known as the Celts. They originated largely from the areas in yellow on the map, in particular around Hallstatt and Lateen. In time, these people and their culture spread to most of Western Europe, including parts of Spain and southern Britain. Celts in England spoke a Celtic language which was like modern Welsh, the language spoken today in Wales. Celts in Scotland and Ireland spoke another Celtic language called Gaelic, which is still spoken in those parts by many people today. Bwrdd I iaith Gymraeg. Forgive my pronunciation, I don't speak Welsh. Rialtas na Éireann, Government of Ireland. I'm not going to try the Scottish one, but all right. Coman litreachas Gaelig nar halba. The Celts who lived in what is now England are now known as Britons. But that probably wasn't what they called themselves. So are the English descendants of the Celts? No. Well, maybe. People like me may have some Celtic DNA in their veins, but we still don't know exactly what happened to the Britons. I'll come to that later. To cut a very long history short, there was this empire, and it was called the Roman Empire. It spread from Italy and eventually reached Gaul, France, also then inhabited by Celts. And Gaul was but a short boat ride from what is now England. The Romans thought it would be a good wheeze to get some boats and see if they could conquer this new place. The white cliffs of Dover can easily be seen from France. It looks nice, doesn't it? However, the Britons didn't like the look of the Romans. They all looked a bit too organized. They didn't want to be part of the Roman Empire. But the Romans were indeed very organized, and bit by bit they took over Britain land and called it the province of Britannia. After a while, most of the Britons found that life in Britannia was not so bad, although there were often uprisings. But the Romans built them towns, houses, and bathhouses, and gave them good food and entertainments. They built aqueducts to get fresh water supplies, and roads so you could get about
and they could lay a nice mosaic in your living room and have it centrally heated. The Celtic Britons became Romano-Britons, and the Romans stayed here for almost 400 years. But the Romans never conquered Scotland. The Scots were just too fierce for them, and they gave up on conquering Scotland. They also never bothered to conquer Ireland. The Emperor Hadrian built a wall across the north of England to mark the furthest border of the empire. Many Romano-Britons became Christians, although other religions were practiced. But in time, Rome became weak. It was attacked by groups of barbarians. Britannia came under attack from Saxon raiders from Germany. For a while, the Romano-Brits fought them off. They even invited Saxons to come here to help defend Britannia. It worked for a while. But then, at the beginning of the 5th century, all Roman troops were recalled to defend Rome itself. The Romans and Britons left behind had to fend for themselves. They were ill-equipped to do this. The Saxon raids became more frequent. Britannia held rich pickings of precious items, crosses, and other valuable churches, jewellery, and silver coinage from private individuals. They took slaves and showed no mercy. Worst of all, they followed the pagan Germanic gods, Thor and Woden. They wanted treasure and loot to take back to northern Germany, and they killed anyone who got in their way. More and more Saxons came across the North Sea, and eventually some decided to settle here. Many of the Romano-Britons fled to the hills of Wales, to Cornwall in southwest England, and to Brittany, Bretagne in France, where other Celtic and Christian people lived. Gradually, people formed local kingdoms. The difference between Anglo-Saxons and Celtic Britons began to fade. Those who wanted to fled to Wales and other western areas. Conflict still remained between pagan Saxons and any remaining Christians. The Pope in Rome sent missionaries to try to revive and expand Christianity in Britain. The Danes. The Anglo-Saxon control of England soon came under threat from a new group of settlers, the Danes. Again, coming under pressure from the movement of people westwards in Europe, Danes and other Nordic settlers arrived on our soil. They challenged the Saxons, who were beginning to accept Christianity, and so the conflict between pagan and Christian gods reared its head again. The Norsemen. The Danes were known as the Norsemen or Vikings. They were quick to discover the opportunities that awaited them in England, Scotland, Ireland, and what is now Cumbria. The town of York fell to the Vikings, and the Vikings called it Jorvik. Those areas which came under Viking control remained in themselves relatively peaceful. But England as a whole was not a safe place to live. The Norsemen in France. The French king allowed the Norsemen to settle in the northwest of France. There they adopted French as their language and customs. In time they became Christians, and we know them now as the Normans. And the part of France in which they lived is now called Normandy. The Normans became powerful rulers in many parts of Europe, establishing new dukedoms in places like southern Italy, Sicily, and what is now the Lebanon. The Normans. The part of France in which they lived is now called Normandy. The Normans became powerful rulers in many parts of Europe, establishing new dukedoms in places like southern Italy, Sicily, and what is now the Lebanon. King Alfred the Great. Born at Wantage, Berkshire in 849, Alfred was the fifth son of Ethelwulf, king of the West Saxons. Viking raids from Denmark got worse. Since the 790s, the Vikings had been using fast, mobile armies numbering thousands of men in shallow draft longships to raid the coasts and inland waters of England for plunder. Such raids were evolving into permanent Danish settlements. In 866, the Vikings seized York and established their own kingdom in the southern part of Northumbria. The Vikings overcame two other major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, East Anglia and Mercia. Their kings were either tortured to death or they fled. But let's recap and not get too far ahead. England had been invaded by Danes, Norsemen, Vikings. They're all the same. The Danes were pagans. The Anglo-Saxons had become largely Christian. Anglo-Saxons believed in love thy neighbour. Vikings believed in killing them and grabbing their land and wives and whatever else they could get hold of. The main kingdoms of Anglo-Saxon England. Norfolk, my county, home of the North Saxon folk. Suffolk, home of the South Saxon folk. Essex, home of the East Saxons. Sussex, home of the South Saxons. And Wessex, the West Saxons. The Dane law. The Danes firstly conquered northern England Then they moved south into East Anglia. They took London. And finally, they threatened what was left of England, Wessex. Wessex fights back. In 870, the Danes attacked Wessex, whose forces were commanded by King Ethelred and his younger brother Alfred. At the Battle of Ashdown in 871, Alfred routed the Viking army in a fiercely fought uphill assault. Alfred's brother died, and Alfred became King of Wessex. He was 21. In early 878, the Danes seized Chippenham in Wiltshire and used it as a fortified base from which to try to devastate Wessex. Alfred adopted the Danes' tactics by building his own fortified base at Athelney in the Somerset marshes. He summoned a mobile army of men from all over Wessex to pursue guerrilla warfare against the Danes. Now, he may be a guerrilla, but he's not King Alfred. Realizing that he could not drive the Danes out of the rest of England, Alfred concluded peace with them in the Treaty of Wedmore. This established the boundaries of Danish territory in England. Many of the Danes returned to East Anglia, where they settled as farmers. Alfred started building a program of well-defended settlements across southern England. These were fortified marketplaces known as boroughs, borough meaning fortress. Such marketplaces shaped the street plan in many parts of London today. A navy of new fast ships ensured that southern England now had a defense against Danish raiders. Alfred the Great. Alfred arranged for important books to be translated from Latin into Anglo-Saxon so that the youth of England could be devoted to learning. He also established a legal code to form a definitive body of Anglo-Saxon law. After Alfred the Great, English kings gradually recaptured more and more land from the Vikings. Alfred's son Edward fought for control of the Danelaw, and Alfred's grandson Athelstan pushed English power north as far as Scotland. King Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor was the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, and he was very pious. He ruled from 1042 to 1066. He was the son of Ethelred the Unready and Emma of Normandy. Now here is where we begin to find out who the English really are. Edward, for whatever reason, religious or otherwise, did not have a son and heir. It is believed that Edward gave a promise that Duke William of Normandy would be his heir. But Harold Godwinson was another contender for the throne. Harold had meanwhile become the power behind the throne. He maintained that on his deathbed, Edward had promised him, Harold, the succession. So Harold wrote to William that Edward had promised the throne to William, but he argued that this was now overridden by Edward's deathbed promise to Harold. William, however, argued that Edward's prior promise to him took precedence. Harold Godwinson had become the most powerful man in England, arguably even more so than Edward himself. When Edward died on the 5th of January 1066, he simply took the throne. The next day, Edward was buried, and Harold was crowned in his place. The handling of the succession issue was dangerously indecisive and contributed to one of the greatest catastrophes to which the English have ever succumbed. And the consequences were, well, the death of King Edward the Confessor caused a succession struggle across northern Europe, with several contenders willing to fight for the throne of England. One such claimant was the King of Norway, Harald Hardrada. He arrived off the north coast of England in September with a fleet of 300 ships packed with around 11,000 Vikings, all anxious to help him in his endeavour. He was also supported by King Harold's brother, Tostig. The Viking armada sailed up the River Ouse in England and seized York. King Harold Godwinson now had a dilemma. Should he march north and confront Hardrada, or remain in the south and prepare for the expected invasion from France by William, Duke of Normandy, the other contender for the throne? The Battle of Stamford Bridge near York. King Harold's Anglo-Saxon army travelled from London to York a distance of 185 miles in just 4 days. On the morning of 25th September, the English army swept onto the enemy. Caught completely by surprise, Hardrada's Vikings had no idea what had hit them. Hardrada and Harold's brother Tostig were killed in the fighting. The invading army were all but annihilated. Just 3 days later, William the Conqueror landed his Norman invasion fleet on England's south coast. William, Duke of Normandy's army was made up of thousands of Normans, Bretons, Flemish, and men from other French provinces. On 28 September 1066, his invasion force landed at Pevensey in Sussex in southern England. Harold marched south to oppose him, leaving a significant portion of his army in the north. Harold's army confronted William's invaders on 14th of October at the Battle of Hastings. William's force defeated Harold, who was killed in the engagement, and William became king. Although William's main rivals were gone, he still faced rebellions over the following years and was not secure on the English throne until after 1072. The result of the Norman conquest. The lands of the resisting English elite were confiscated. Some of the elite fled into exile. To control his new kingdom, William granted lands to his followers and built castles commanding military strongpoints throughout the land. The Domesday Book, a manuscript record of the Great Survey of much of England and parts of Wales, was completed by 1086. The Domesday Book informed precisely what land was available in England and Wales.
Hola.
Buenas tardes.
Other effects of the conquest included changes to the royal court,
Muy cívicos todos silenciándose.
the introduction of the Norman language as the language of the elites, changes in the composition of the upper classes, as William gave away parcels of land identified by the Domesday Book to his Norman followers. More gradual changes affected the agricultural classes and village life, as the new Norman administrators took over many of the forms of Anglo-Saxon government. Thus was created much of the England we know today. For example, the counties, run by Norman counts appointed by William. There was also created the beginnings of modern English, the mixture of French elitist words with the more mundane Anglo-Saxon words used by the serfs. Linguistic changes after the conquest. French was for Normans. Saxon English was for the serfs. An example. The Anglo-Saxons would call a pig or a swine. When it reached the Norman table, it became pork, French porc. Likewise, cow became beef, bœuf. An example of Anglo-Saxon English. See if you can understand what it means. Fere ure, det du an hevenom, si din name gehalgot. Tobe kube din ris, geworden in wille an herven, zoals we af an heaven. Urne gedeel wam wikken hlaf, ziele os today. And forgive us our guiltes.
Maxi muerta.
As well we forgive us our guiltes.
Estoy transmitiendo pasapalabra para que aprendáis español, los que queráis.
Ac alles us of evil. '14th century Middle English. In Flanders, Willem, there was a company of younger folk that haunted and folly, as reed, hazard, stews and tavernes, whereas with harpes, lutes and sternes, they dance and play in a dies, both at day and night, and eten and drinken over him micht, through which they do the devil sacrifice. lives in that devilish temple in cursed weise by superfluity abominable. Here authors being so great and so damnable that it is grisly to hear him swear. In Flanders, there was a company of young folk that lived in folly, such as riot, gambling, brothels, and taverns, where with lutes and harps and guitars they dance and play at dice both day and night. They eat also and drink over their limit, through which they do the devil's sacrifice, within the devil's temple in cursed way, by abominable excess. Their oaths are so great and so damnable that it is dreadful to hear them swear. And that is who the English now are. We have Danish, Norwegian, German, Dutch, and French blood in our veins, as well as the blood of countless other nations over the years as our influence and empire expanded. We live in a country whose head of state is Queen Elizabeth II. She has a direct bloodline to King Alfred and William the Conqueror. We live in counties, many of which still have families descended from the Normans. And many of those families still have wealth and power. Our Prime Minister is also a descendant of William the Conqueror. Unfortunately, I'm not. The British caste system is made up largely of those who have and those who have not. Get my point? Of course, our demography has been changing throughout history. We live with the results of past colonialism, trade and empire, and slavery. But we are all now British. We are a multicultural nation made up of all parts of the British Isles, Scots, Welsh, Northern Irish, to some extent Southern Irish, and many other parts of the world. Indians, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Nigerians, Jamaicans. The list goes on. But I won't. That's who we are.
Oh, thank you so much, Kitty. Thank you so much.
You're
It was
welcome.
amazing. It was amazing. Thank you. Really interesting. I think we all have learned a lot today.
Good.
Your presentation.
Really good, but Ori was better.
Okay, so guys, did you like it? Do you want to make any comments, guys, in the chat? In the
Yo tengo un comentario.
likes?
Me gustó mucho la presentación, aprendí mucho. Me gustó mucho la voz de la presentadora. Y creo que, o sea, espero por lo menos que volvamos a tener estos eventos porque Oriana las maneja genial, las maneja genial. Me gusta, me encanta.
Deberíamos hablar de Kifikala. O sea, él es el que prepara toda la
Se prepara, sí, ahora
presentación.
prepara muy bien la presentación, si alguien quiere
Bueno,
traducir, me gusta.
Decir en inglés, ¿por qué decir en español?
just think I really liked the narration, and I think that it was really well organized and really interesting content. So it was one of the best presentations I think we've had. It was really well done.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the video skipped some slides. There were some jumps in it, and I just think that's to do with streaming over the internet, and things just go wrong sometimes. On my end, hear very well, so I hope other people could hear what I was saying.
No, actually, it was probably your maybe it was some kind of like problem in your connection because for
Could be.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, it was perfect. Don't worry, it was perfect. It was
Oh, good.
perfect.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
all good. Yeah.
Okay.
Like very, very, very interesting. No sé si alguien más quiere hacer un comentario sobre la presentación. Does anyone have any questions?
Mm-hmm.
¿Alguna pregunta? Sí, perdón. ¿Quién dijo sí? Alguien dijo sí, creo.
Sí, yo escuché.
Does anyone have any questions? At least you can write them on the chat. Oh yeah, question, Kishi. Someone was asking, where are you from? If you were from the north of England.
If I was from the north.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm a Londoner. I'm from London. Yeah, I was born in London and went to school in London and worked most of my life either in London or Surrey, which is the next door county. I worked at London Airport.
Yeah, I could hear the Cockney.
Is the accent different in Norfolk from?
Oh yes.
London?
Well, I mean, yeah, it is different. I mean, most people around here speak a sort of mixture of accents because this is an area where people come to retire. It's because property is a lot cheaper in Norfolk. People, when they stop working, they think, oh, we'll go to Norfolk, we can sell our house, and then we'll have some extra money to live on, which is exactly what I did. But in Norfolk, yeah, Norfolk and Suffolk have a very similar accent. And I suppose how would they talk? They would say, "I'm going to Norwich today." They talk like that. They country folk and farmers, and they talk like that. So that gives you an idea. But there's lots of accents in England. I mean, England has, there's an accent in the northeast of England. There's an accent in the northwest. Liverpool has its own accent. Birmingham area has a dreadful accent. Like, they talk like this all the time. They sort of speak in a funny sort of way. It's just absolutely peculiar. I hate that accent. But yeah, we have a lot of accents and regional accents.
All right, they're chatting about Birmingham like that.
Sorry?
Keefe, I have to
Chatting
say,
like
from
Birmingham
Scotland,
like that. Okay.
Keefe, I have to say, from Scotland, you will hate our accents then if you don't like that.
Oh, I love Scots accent. I just, I love a Scottish accent. There's no problem with that.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I'm very excited about hearing your accent, Dex. Also, I think someone has a question, but they say they're shy, so they don't unmute their mics. What did you study in college, Kifi? Did you study in college?
I studied German as main subject. I went to university to study French as well. But when I got there, I decided to do Italian because they were offering beginner's Italian. And within the first 2 years, we had to get up to degree standard, and we had to learn, all about Dante Alighieri and Boccaccio and the Decameron and Machiavelli about the prince and all that sort of thing. So I thoroughly enjoyed my Italian. German not so much, because German literature can be a bit dry. But yeah, so I did German and Italian.
Oh, very interesting. That's really nice. Kiffy. And then you also are very...
Yeah. Kiffy, I have a question.
Yep.
So if you don't mind, can you tell us, like, how old are you?
75.
Okay.
Oh, look at you, Kiffy. I think Kiffy has one of the greatest voices I have ever heard. It's amazing. He's also very talented. He's an excellent person. He's very smart. It's just listening to him talking about anything is just a pleasure.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very, very nice. Like Kiffy already knows that I love him. Like it's really he's really interesting.
And you know I love you.
I love Ori. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Kiffy.
You're welcome.
Kiffy, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Kiffy.
Yes. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you fine.
Hola. Hola.
Yeah. He's talking. Oh, I cannot hear
he's
him.
talking.
What
You're not.
happened?
Yeah, he's
Okay,
talking.
I rejoin. Sorry. Kiffy, there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. When I was talking and I said that I was complimenting you, I thought you were ignoring me.
Oh no! I was writing everything you said down so that I can put it in my memoirs.
You're amazing, Kiffy. It was really nice to hear your presentation. Very interesting as always.
Thank you.
Very, very nice.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for always sharing everything you know or everything you are with us.
That's okay. Fine. I love it. I love being with you guys. You know, I look upon you guys as my friends. So there we are.
Oh, they're like clapping you in the chat.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's see. Okay. What's under the emoji?
Alright, Kiffy, so I have like one last question.
Okay.
Do you think like people in the UK have like something against the Birmingham accent? Like they don't like it, or
No. I mean, let me put that right. I mean, it's a personal thing for me that the what we call the Black Country or the Midlands accent, and my parents come from the Midlands and they had that accent as well. So no, I've got nothing against it, not at all. And the people who come from the Midlands are obviously very proud of the way that they speak. But sometimes particularly when you're in this, when those people come to the south of England, it does sound a little bit peculiar. But then nearly all of the accents, you know, if I go to the north of England and I'm talking like I am now, they think I'm really posh, that I'm really upper class, you know, that I'm, you know, very awfully well educated and all that sort of thing. And the truth is I'm not. I'm just an ordinary person, you know, but we all talk in our different ways, and you'll probably hear that when takes over, that that the people have an entirely different way of speaking in Scotland, and there's lots of interesting stories about that.
Someone asking in the chat if you like Scouse accent, Kiffy.
The Scouse accent. The Scouse accent actually can be quite difficult to understand because a lot of the pronunciation around the Liverpool area is at the back of the mouth, in the throat. There's a lot of sort of I can't do a Liverpudlian accent, but hey, Wack, what are you doing today? And it's really peculiar. I mean, they talk like the Beatles, but it's even worse. than the Beatles, but yeah, I mean the Liverpudlian accent. Yeah, I mean I'm a great believer in regional accents. Don't get me wrong. I don't want everybody to speak like me or to speak like the Queen or whoever. I want people to speak their local accents and their local languages because my sister-in-law, she lives in Wales. And in Wales, they do speak Welsh, that funny language that I showed on the slides. They speak it, and the road signs are written in English and Welsh. So when you come up to a slow sign on the road, when you're coming up to a junction, you will see slow, but then in front of that you will see araf, which is Welsh for slow. And everything in Wales is bilingual. And in parts of Wales, people speak English. In parts of Wales, they speak English and Welsh. And in other parts, they prefer to speak Welsh.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Kiffy. I
You're
think
welcome.
now we have next presentation, then we can go again with any questions you may have. Dex, do you want to start streaming your screen?
Yeah, sure, I will.
Sweet voice. I like it. Good, good, good. Ok, tenemos una presentación más, chicos, así que si se quieren quedar para seguir practicando las listening skills con otros acentos, genial. En este caso creo que Tex es Scottish, creo, no sé. No me acuerdo. Ok. Ok, Tex empezó a transmitir su pantalla por si quieren mirar. Ok, Tex, vamos a ver. You can start whenever you want. You can introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm, as people said, I live in the northeast of Scotland, so around here there's not. Can everyone hear me? Like, actually.
Oh, you're cutting out a lot. Is it your internet?
Yeah,
or
I've
noticed. Is it your internet or is it your?
I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave and rejoin because it's sometimes a problem.
Yeah. Of course. Okay, guys. Meanwhile, we can make noises.
Ori, can't you come round with some ice cream? We need ice cream in the interval. Okay.
Okay, can everyone see my screen and hear me all right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There was a car there. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Okay, talk and we can see if it works.
So, I'm from Bonnie Wee, Scotland, pretty little Scotland, in the northeast. So, up here is relatively different to down in London and nearby where Keefe lives, which I will say, if you like his accent, how he speaks, you should really check out some of the things that David Attenborough has done. He's a nature documentary maker, and he has an amazing voice as well. Scotland. Our most important things to us is our language. Multiple languages, actually. We have a bunch of dialects where you can see where Scotland's motto is "Who dare meddle with me?", which basically means "Who dares to meddle with me? Who dares to mess with me?" And we have a population of about 5.5 million people, so we're relatively small. So I'm going to talk about a lot of, well, everything Scottish. So Scottish history, Scottish and English civil history, because we've had our fair share of wars with the English. Scots dialect, particularly my local one of Doric, and then some Scots poetry. With Scottish culture, Gaelic, as Kishi mentioned earlier, though sorry to tell you that you did butcher your pronunciation. And I'm also going to talk about our countryside, actually, since it's a massive part of our culture, and then also just some facts. So, Scottish history. A crash course, really. This isn't nearly as in-depth as Keith's was, and I don't quite have the pictures because it wasn't as documented. But Scotland's had settlements, especially in the northeast and the Highlands and Islands, which is the very tip of Scotland, which date all the way back to 2000 or 12,000 BCE. And Scotland settlers were called Picts. These settlers remained in Scotland for thousands of years and up to and throughout the Roman invasion of Scotland. Or the Roman invasion of the UK, I should say. During the Roman invasion of England, specifically. Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt.
Everything alright?
You still sound like robotic. I think it's the internet, and I don't know if like someone else can volunteer to stream the screen. Do they have to like download the presentation, or do you have any link?
No. Do you know the link that I sent in the group chat for this? You should be able to access it.
Okay, let's see. I don't know if anyone can share the screen. Because maybe if you stop the stream and you just talk, maybe you would stop sound. Like that. Okay, so stop streaming and talk. Like talk.
Is this better then? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you don't sound robotic at all. Let's see. Okay,
Yeah, sounds much better. You're distorting actually on the sound.
Yeah.
Just slightly.
Okay, I can try and change my microphone.
Yeah,
there's
the link. Okay, Sad, do you want the link? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so Sad, can you like stream the screen? Okay, so tag someone else is gonna like stream the screen, just in case. Yes. Can you watch the stream, tags? I guess present. Yeah, that.
If you just click present in the top corner.
Yeah, sí, te pone present directamente y ándale a la slide que estaba antes. Era. Me parece que is that the slide text?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
So as I was saying, Scotland has had settlers and people living in it for thousands and thousands of years. Particularly during the Roman invasion of England, which Keith talked about earlier, the Romans built what's now known as Hadrian's Wall, which is an extremely large stone wall that stretches over 70 miles through the countryside in the year 122 AD. This was in an effort to protect themselves from the Picts, who they called barbarians, and it proved unsuccessful as we managed, the Picts managed to breach it and surpass this wall hundreds of times throughout its years. Can you just go to the next slide, please? So in 1800 AD, this is a long time later, the Vikings landed in Scotland, the Norse. They first of all tried to take Scotland by force, and had many battles to do this, but ended up actually settling as traders on the west coast, and their influences can still be seen throughout Scottish culture. They were the first people to introduce the idea of money, whereas before Scotland had been a bartering system, where someone might trade 2 chickens for a goat, but they introduced the use of gold, silver, and other valuables. Time as the Vikings settled in the west of Scotland, the Picts on the east coast forged a new kingdom, which at the time was known as the Kingdom of Alba. where the Scottish word, or the Gaelic word for Scotland, Alba comes from. So Macbeth. Now, many of you should know the famous Shakespeare play Macbeth. But in fact, Macbeth was a real Scottish king. And though William Shakespeare did take inspiration from the real Scottish king of Macbeth Macfinlach, or simply just known as Macbeth, the play is almost completely fictitious in its plot. As he didn't kill or do many of the things that we hear about in the play. He's actually the King of Scotland from 1040 all the way up to his death in 1050 AD. It was only a few years before the Norman conquest of England, as Keith talked about, in 1066, which brought in William I, or William the Conqueror. Next slide, please. So, Scotland's history. Scotland and England had separate monarchies. Well, they're joint now, but Scotland and England had separate monasteries for years until the Union of the Crowns in 1603. But I will talk about that more later. Particularly in 1927, there was what's known as the succession crisis, where the crown is almost up for grabs. No one quite knew who the real king or heir to the throne would be. So this brought unrest to Scotland after the death of Alexander III. The King of England at the time, Edward I, or known as Longshanks by the Scots, which literally means long legs, thought that he should be the king. Marched his troops up to Scotland, and there was a series of sieges of castles. A siege is where an army surrounds a castle, stopping any attempt to move in or out. So Edward I's army planned on crossing the River Forth at Stirling Bridge, and the Scots, who were led by William Wallace, one of the most famous Scots in history, seized this opportunity to attack them. The bridge was made of wood, because they didn't have advanced materials at the time, such as building with iron. So the Scots decided to break and burn the supports under this. This caused hundreds of English soldiers to drown, and those of them who could swim, they ended up killing. This was a victory that cemented William Wallace as one of Scotland's most famous people. Can I get the next slide, please? So this unrest continued well into the 14th century, where Robert the Bruce took the throne and was crowned King of Scotland. However, fighting continued until the year 1314 at the Battle of Bannockburn. Defeated King Edward II, the next English king trying to take Scotland. This was a major turning point in his rule. One of Scotland's most famous kings, and there's a lot of folktales written about him and his rise to power, actually. So, many people don't actually know about this, but the Declaration of Arbroath is one of the biggest things in Scottish history, and I actually only live half an hour away from Arbroath. But this is a letter that was written in Latin, that was signed by Scottish barons and nobles, all the important people at the time, and Pope John the 22nd. And the declaration declared Scotland's state as an independent sovereign state. Although it already was, and the effect of it was largely symbolic, the Declaration remains an important document in Scottish history. So many historians believe that America's founding fathers were inspired by the Declaration of Arbroath through some of the clauses that they use in the United States Declaration of Independence. Most of the Scottish history before we get to the Scottish and English civil history. So this was for a lot of betrayals, to be honest. So Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary was born in Linlithgow Palace, just outside Glasgow area. And she was actually only 6 days old when her father, King James V, died, making her queen. She was actually one of the youngest queens in history. Her reign a Catholic-Protestant conflict, and this caused a massive civil unrest in this period known as rough wooing. Mary Queen of Scots and Mary Elizabeth I of England, actually, were cousins. In England, Elizabeth I was worried about the possibility of a Catholic plot to overthrow her, so she imprisoned Mary, Queen of Scots, and later, after almost 19 years of captivity, actually beheaded her. So Mary, Queen of Scots was beheaded by her own cousin. It's a grim tale. James the VI of Scotland was Mary's child, however, and he was 13 months old at the time of her death, when she was forced to give up the Scottish throne. And since Elizabeth I died with no children, this meant that James VI was the only blood relative to Elizabeth. Therefore, he took the English throne and became James VI of Scotland and first of England, as well as known as the Union of Crowns I talked about earlier. So, as I said, because Elizabeth and Mary were cousins, he was the one who was deemed to be the king. At the Battle of Culloden in 1746, there was the Jacobite uprising. The Jacobites were a group of freedom fighters who wanted Scotland to be an independent state again, to be free from England's reign, which is not a battle anymore, but it's still an ongoing thing. A lot of Scots do want independence. However, the Battle of Culloden was the last hand-to-hand battle fought on British soil. The Jacobites were unfortunately no match for the Hanoverian English army. The battle lasted only an hour, and the Jacobites were absolutely destroyed and brutally crushed. The Jacobites were made up of many notable Scottish clans, a lot of which still exist today but are merely a formality. Okay, the next slide, please. Dialects now. So, what are the Scots dialects? There isn't necessarily one set dialect. There's many varieties of Scottish dialects, such as Dundonian, which comes from Dundee, Glaswegian, which is from Glasgow and sounds a bit like for Glasgow. Talk and the Keefe showed, but it sounds a lot more. I don't know how to describe it, but that's what Glaswegian accent sounds like. And Dark, which is from the northeast, where I'm from. Though Scots dialects were originally spoken languages, they've only used in small clusters of towns. There have been many attempts to make the dialects a written language as well. From now on, I'm mainly focusing on Dark, my local dialect. So, just a couple of things. The phrase, how are you, would be like, there isn't really much logic to it. And it would literally translate to, how are you, as I said, but words on their own don't mean anything. It's only when you put them together, get some meaning. And how's everybody today? Who's a buddy a day? Again, none of those words particularly have any meaning on their own apart from day and buddy, meaning day and everybody respectively. So if we get next slide, this is part of Rodal's BFG. This is actually the first paragraph in the book, which would read as, Sophie couldna sleep. A bright beam of moonlight was slicked in through a chink in the curtains. It was sheenen right onto her pillow. The other bairns in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie sleek it hen and lay gay still. She tried awful muck hard to doze off. Which would mean... Oh, sorry. Sophie couldn't sleep. A bright beam of moonlight was shining through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right onto her pillow. The kids in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie tried to lie very still. She tried very hard to fall asleep. Yeah, next slide. So, Scottish poetry. There's a lot of examples of Scottish poetry that are written in Gaelic. Robert, or Rabbie Burns, is by far Scotland's most famous poet. So, who was he? Robert Burns, or locally known as Rabbie Burns in Scotland, as I said, the most famous poet who wrote in the Scottish dialect. Some of his most famous pieces include Tamus, Tam O'Shanter, Love is Like a Red, Red Rose, and the Selkirk Grace. Not to mention the world-famous Auld Lang Syne. So, what are Auld Lang Syne and Selkirk Grace? These are arguably two of Burns' most famous pieces. Auld Lang Syne is typically sung at New Year's parties. It is a song written by Robert Burns about old memories with a good friend. This light links to the Scottish idea of out with the old, in with the new. A typical theme for New Year's parties, and actually at midnight on New Year's, Scottish people will open the back door and the front door of their house to let the new flow in and the old flow out. In reality, it just lets the house get very cold, but tradition. Selkirk Grace is a short prayer said on Burns Night, the 25th of January, which is Robert Burns' birthday. And it's said before people all across Scotland tuck into the traditional meal of haggis, neeps, and tatties, which I'll talk about more in a second. Can you go on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so this is an example of Auld Lang Syne.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for days of Auld Lang Syne.
Okay, if you pause that, I think that kind of gives us the idea. Just move on to the next slide. So, as you can see up in the top corner, might be a little hard to read, but that's the Selkirk Grace. It's nice and short, and it's some hay meat and can eat, and some would eat that want it. But we hay meat and we can eat, and say let the Lord be thanked. It translates to some have meat and can't eat, but can't eat, and some would eat that want it. But we have meat and we can eat, so to the Lord be thankful. And then on the right we can see a meal that is haggis, neeps, and tatties. So the brown looking stuff is haggis, which is a very typical Scottish dish. Potatoes, the tatties, which tatty is just a Scottish word for potatoes. And the orangey looking thing is neeps, or I've actually forgotten the English word. Parson. No.
Swede.
I wouldn't call it Swede though.
Sweet
There's
potato.
an argument about. Yeah, there's an argument about it. My wife calls it turnip, but there we go.
Yeah, a turnip. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a haggis. A haggis is a small animal that's found in the hills.
Aha.
So we have.
Get on.
If you can put yourself on mute, Keefe.
I will. Sorry.
We have the one with hair is actually from the East Coast near me, and the one without it is the West Coast haggis. So you can't see it from these photos, but haggis typically have two sets of legs that are longer than the other, and this helps for running through the mountains and keeping stable. As you can see, they're very kind of short, meaning that they topple over really easily when you're hunting them. In the corner, we can see what a prepared caught haggis looks like. So if you can go on to the next slide. Scottish Gaelic. Now, this is where I will critique your pronunciation, Keefe. What is Scottish Gaelic? It's a language that's commonly spoken in the Highlands and Islands. It's closely related to Scottish Gaelic is closely related to Irish Gaelic, although they are completely distinct languages. I'm actually currently studying Gaelic, but a few useful phrases are means what is your name. This literally translates to is Misha, which Gaelic is backwards, so you're saying am I rather than I am. So someone might ask, and then Mohort, and I would say, is Misha text. And then Kimrahahu, still the best phrase I've ever said, is how are you? But similarly to how Spanish has the two forms of you, if we need to go back a second, tu and usted, we have Kimrahahu and Kimrahashiv, which are used for people you know and younger people. And Kimrahashiv is used for older people and more formal. And then go on to the next one, but I'll talk a little bit more about Gaelic because it's a really interesting language which uses a lot of commas, hyphens, and that in just everyday words. Also of McDonald, McDougall, McFarlane. These actually have meaning in Gaelic. Mac means child of. So if a father was called Donald, their child would most likely be called something name. For example, Katie, McDonald, or Nick Donald. And then if you can move on, please. So Scottish culture. You might think the UK doesn't particularly have a culture, but Scotland actually does. So one of the first celebrations in a year for us is Burns Night, which I said earlier is celebrated on the 25th of January. Often people will go out to a ceilidh on this night. So a ceilidh is a type of party where there tends to be quite a lot of alcohol, to be honest, but mixed with traditional Scottish dancing, which I've got a video of later, and it never ends well, to be honest, as Scottish dancing includes a lot of spinning. And said again earlier, before people tuck into the traditional meal of haggis, and tatties, or haggis, potatoes, and turnip, they read out the Selkirk Grace, a symbol of gratitude for the food. And we have events called Burns Suppers, where people will gather to eat haggis, and tatties, and read Burns poems. And if you go to one of these, the haggis will actually be piped into the room with bagpipes, whilst one of Burns' other poems, addressed at haggis, is read out loud. Again, this just shows how traditional Scotland can be. So here's a Strip the Willow, and if you play, I'll explain roughly what's going on at the same time. So you might watch in the volume down. So we can see right at the back, there's the man and the lady in the pink dress, and Sister Strip the Willow. So they start off by spinning for a count of 8 together. Out to the opposite sides, spin people on the outside and come back in together on the inside. I can imagine when you mix this with a bunch of alcohol, a lot of people fall down. It is one of the most entertaining things you will ever see, especially when one of the things you always forget about ceilidh is that old men may look frail, but they will throw you across the dance floor. No matter how much you weigh, how tall you are, there will always be that old man at ceilidh who looks like he doesn't have a single gram of muscle in him, and he will send you flying across the dance floor. If you just go on to the next slide then. Great. So Scottish music. Us Scots have actually always loved our music. So we have traditional Scottish music, which is a pibroch, a solo piece for a bagpipe, which is one of Scotland's national instruments. But we also have a lot of different styles of music, which I won't show you examples of any apart from the pibroch now, but I have some at the end of the PowerPoint if people would like to hear them. And those include Puirtabul, which is mouth music, which is sung in Gaelic, Strathspey, which is a type of dance, Scots ballads, which are stories that are told, and Celtic rock. If you just go on to the next slide, please. Tartan. So us Scots also love our heritage and history. In fact, we have one of the highest of castles in any country, with almost 1,500 of them. One of the things you'll probably associate with Scotland is tartan, so what actually is it? Tartan is a type of Scottish pattern and material, actually, that So tartan was a type of Scottish pattern material that was woven in the Outer Hebrides, which are a collection of Scottish islands. That was actually a staple part, a very important part of Scottish national dress, the kilt, as you can see a bagpiper down the corner wearing. And then that is a sample of tartan on the other side. So continue on. So Scottish countryside. Why is it something that we're so proud of? Because Scotland has actually been voted the most beautiful place on earth by... and I couldn't find the name of it. But I am more than happy to look for it later and share it in the chats if you want to. And it's not actually hard to see why. Because Scotland has such diverse landscapes and wildlife populations, as well as stunning mountain ranges and dazzling waterfalls. So I've got a few photos here, just take a look, and I'll briefly explain them. So this is some of our cairns, which are mountains. As you can see, it's absolutely beautiful views. And if you just keep clicking through these slowly. This is part of Glen Esk, actually, and we can see the river running right through the center of it. And this just shows some Scotland's really more isolated houses and how beautiful I think the countryside can be. Next one. This is some of our wildlife in winter, actually. We have a very high deer population here. And that's and you might not expect it, but Scotland has puffins. And they live in, again, some of the Highlands and Midlands, which, as they are, well, seabirds. We also have red squirrels, and we're one of the few countries that luckily has red squirrels that are natives. Because, unlike, we also have grey squirrels, but they were brought in from ships that came in America, and are actually really detrimental to our red squirrel population, as they're able to eat nuts and foods that are less ripe. Red squirrels need to wait for it to ripen. Can you just go on again? Only about 5 minutes away from me, there's a seal colony at the moment, which is wonderful. And of course, the Highland cow. Sorry, if you just go back again. Highland cows, an absolute staple part of Scotland's imagery, with their dashing horns and lovely ginger manes. They're really kind of a symbol of Scotland. Continue on. And Nessie, Scotland's sweetheart. So Nessie is a creature believed to live in Loch Ness. And we get around about 7 to 15 sightings a year, depending on how touristic it's been. There haven't been many sightings of Nessie this year, but she's a solitary creature and actually the size of Loch Ness, which is about 27 miles long. It's the longest and largest loch in Scotland. Loch is a Scots word for lake. But yeah, she's still a mystery to science. And many people dedicate years of their life trying to find her. Go on to some just generally fun facts about Scotland. Tallest waterfall in Britain, named Chenhul Achain. It is 658 feet, which is about 3 times the height of Niagara Falls. Scotland's official animal is the unicorn, which whenever the Queen comes to visit, with England's official animal being the lion, they're always presented as the unicorn and the lion. The unicorn's always put first to symbolize Scotland's pride. However, in symbols in England, the lion is put first. Scotland has a whopping 790 islands, and it's also home to the oldest tree in Europe. It's a twisted U, and it's been around for about 3,000 years. Scotland was home to the inventors of the pneumatic tire, so if anyone owns a car and have tires on it, it was a Scots person that gave you those. And there are also over 600 square miles of freshwater lakes and lochs in Scotland. So, I'll be happy to answer them all. And then if you just leave on that, because these are examples of the other types of music.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Are you gonna play the music? hashtags.
First one is you might have to go into the presentation and present it to be able to play it. So this first one is Purta Buell, which is Scottish mouth music, and I actually think it sounds lovely, but everyone has a bit differing opinions on it, so if you just play it. Okay, so if you want to pause it, this is Purta Buell, or Scottish mouth music, which is sung in Gaelic, hence why it might not make much sense to people who, well, even it makes a little sense to me. It's a staple part of music in the Highlands of Scotland, and personally I really enjoy it. Want to go on to the next example? This is Purta Buell, a solo piece for bagpipes. You may recognize this. Next example, I know that bagpipes, some people love them, I personally really like them, but others don't like them too much, as some people do find them quite piercing, their sound. But if you move on to the next example, please. This is an example of a Scots ballad, the Bonnie Banks of Loch Lomond, which is actually probably one of my favourite Scots songs.
By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love will never meet again, on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you take the high road and I'll take the low, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye, for me and my true love will never meet again, on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
Okay, so if you want to pause this, the story of this song, as I said, Scots ballads always tell a story, and Loch Lomond actually was written about a Scottish couple who were imprisoned in England, hence why it's saying about their true love. One of them managed to escape back to Scotland by taking the high road round Loch Lomond. However, the other one was unfortunately sentenced to death, which is why the line is "I'll be in Scotland before you," and signifying that they're unfortunately never coming back home. I personally really like this song and think it is so beautifully sung in this rendition. So if you want to go on to the last one, this is one that you're probably incredibly likely to know. This is an example of Scottish Celtic rock or pop music being proclaimed as 500 miles. If you just want to get the, if you want to get the next example, please.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay, let's see if anyone has questions. But it was really nice, a really nice presentation, very interesting. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now let's see if anyone has any questions. It's a nice opportunity to ask any questions you may have. Let's see. You can type it on the chat if you don't want to unmute your mic. Okay, can you read it? Text says, what's your favorite part of Scotland or place?
That's a good question, actually, because I really love where I'm from, since I love the countryside here. But I also really I went on holiday up by Inverness, by Loch Ness. Actually, I went all the way around it in a day, and it's really pretty up there as well. So I think it would have to be probably either where I live or the Scottish Highlands, since they're just absolutely stunning.
Interesting. Really nice. I really love the song. Like the not the last like yeah, the last one, but also the other one. The couple.
Yeah,
The couple,
that's
yeah. Really
it's a
nice
really beautiful song. It really
I'm
is.
gonna I wrote down the name because I would like to read about it and also listen to it. It's really nice song, so very interesting.
There's the name in the question and answers if you need the spelling.
Oh, oh, thank you. It was really nice. No sé si alguien tiene una pregunta para hacer inglés, español, alemán, francés. Escríbala, desmutece, mande un pajarito, tire una bomba de humo. Ah! Is this the title of the second to the last song?
Yes, it is. It is. That's the one that was about the couple.
Well, let's see. I think. Oh yeah, I think Kyle sent me the link, so I'm just gonna share it here in case anyone wants to listen to it. Is that one right?
Yes, that's the example I used.
Oh, thank you so much. Neil, if you want, you can stop the recording so it's not that long, and then you can send it to me. And now we can, if anyone has any question, they can keep asking. But let's end the recording.